This is the old stone barn next to the house we purchased a few months ago in the middle of nowhere. We're converting it into a gym and workshop, and the first step is to repair the internal walls the way they would have done it hundreds of years ago when it was built. So until a few months ago, we lived on a new build housing estate and had never done any DIY at all, and will now be working with some of the most dangerous building materials known to man. What can go wrong? So day one begins with vacuuming around 300 years of dust from the stone and lime mortar walls. We have a very clear idea of what we want these to end up looking like, and in theory how to get them there. One of the first things we did when we moved here was arrange for a local expert in old buildings to teach us how to use powdered quicklime, and that will be the basis for nearly everything we do to these walls. So with the walls dust and cobweb free, time to start mixing. And yes, that is a jug we stole from the kitchen. Now the barn consists of 3 separate spaces that will become the gym, the workshop and bicycle maintenance area, and then a general storeroom. We're starting with the gym, but all the rooms need the same work doing. What we're making here is a mix of sharp sand, gravel and non-hydraulic lime. Now this is different to the NHL or natural hydraulic lime you might see at your regular builders merchants. Non-hydraulic lime only sets hard through carbonisation, exposure to carbon dioxide, which means it stays soft much longer and so can be harder to work with. That's not the main reason it's less popular than natural hydraulic lime though. It's also a bit dangerous. So why use it? Well, I'll explain that in a bit. First, let's get some on the walls. When it's exposed to water, it absorbs the fluid so violently it goes through an exothermic reaction and gets literally boiling hot. Get it on yourself and get splashed with water and you are in trouble. Get it on a part of your body that's already moist, like your eyes or inside your lungs, and you'll wish you called it a day at vacuuming the cobwebs. They've all been sprayed down with water to stop the mixture drying out too fast when it's applied, and we are starting with a relatively thick mixture like regular cement-based mortar to fill in the gaps where the original lime mortar has crumbled away over the years. In some places leaving holes so big we've had to fill the gaps with new stones. And we did this the way they probably did when they built the place, by just grabbing a couple out of the stream running beside the house. And so day one was something of a massive learning curve. Never having done much more than pull up a shelf, we were both trying to figure out how to repoint the walls, keep it out of our eyes, and not focus too much on which one of us was doing a better job than the other. Okay, so the footage that you were watching was from a couple of days ago, the first day of working here, and the GoPro died before we did. We carried on working after the filming stopped, and we jumped forward quite a bit. I'm going to bring you up to speed, because we've got walls that are now looking like this. This is walls that have had the big holes filled in with the mortar and stone mix, and then a little bit of pointing done where it was needed, and then on top of that, a slurry. It's basically a very watered down mortar mix. It goes on with a brush. Literally, you brush it on. It forms a kind of really sort of thin skim of lime render, I guess you'd describe it as. No, it's all looking pretty good. There's no cracking, there's no flaking. Once we've got whitewash on here and it's nice and white and clean looking, it's exactly the finish that we're going for. The one thing we did learn from last time is that mixing this stuff up by hand is an absolute chore. So today a little JCB cement mixer has arrived. But yeah, basically what's going to follow now is just us getting all of the walls in here to this standard, which is where it's ready for some whitewashing. So it sounds like everything is going to plan. Well, it was at that point. Now you remember I mentioned that the quicklime is pretty dangerous stuff and that you want to avoid breathing it in or getting it anywhere near you really. Well, in my excitement at having a new toy to play with, I'd only ever seen a cement mixer on TV before, I pretty much forgot the whole deadly lung burning powder thing. At some point during this video I was going to mention that we're complete beginners with little idea what we're doing, and you should be watching this for entertainment purposes only and not as a guide to copy in any way. But I'm not sure that warning is necessary. After day 2's near-death experience, day 3 was largely uneventful, and we just cracked on with filling the holes, repointing and then adding a slurry top coat to create a lovely smooth finish that still shows off the original stone structure. And the reason we're using lime and not just regular cement, which has actually been used in places within this barn in the past to patch things up, it's not just because it's a material consistent with the original construction. It's mainly because lime is much more breathable, and in an old building like this that's really important. These walls have no cavity, they're 600 to 800 mil thick and made of solid stone. That means moisture can, in places, work its way through from the outside. When it reaches the inside, it needs to be able to evaporate into the internal space and leave the wall. If it can't, because the internal wall is covered in something that is waterproof, like cement or a modern paint, the water can build up behind it and eventually create problems. Damp, mould and failing surface coverings are all possible. Our hope here is that the walls can breathe the way they were designed to. Okay, end of another day, and it's slow going, but it's also pretty cool. Got this section here done now, blended in the floor as well nicely. Got some mortar on this, but no slurry yet. Obviously this wall was already done. Top of this has been done, the breeze block's been done, got this section of the wall done here, and then Jen has done some hole filling. We've also decided that we're going to leave a section up in the gable end there, so basically we have some of the original stone kind of showing through as a sort of reminder of what it was like when we moved in. So it'll be an original bit. So yeah, another day. Day 4 and more of the same, although one slight change to our approach was to do less repointing and jump straight to the lime slurry top coat instead. If this was an external wall, then repointing it properly would be more important to prevent water penetration, but on the inside it's less of an issue, and just applying the slurry top coat gave the wall a really rustic look with more of the brickwork showing through. Hopefully it ends up looking just as good as the other walls once finished. Day 5 and Jen in the gym to be on her own, getting one whole section of wall coated in a slurry mix, and there's little more to achieving the finish we wanted than simply slapping it on and coating the wall using a stiff brush. There is a beautiful simplicity to this job, and it creates a wall and a surface that is truly fit for purpose and nothing more. In a modern house you'd worry about the walls being level and smooth and perfect. This is a barn, and even when it's a gym, it will still be a barn. So these walls are perfect because they aren't perfect. Day 6 began the way each day had begun, with brushing down the previous day's work to remove any over-application of lime and also brush out the stroke marks from the paintbrush that applied it. We also kept it damp so that it would slightly slow the curing process, and that really seemed to be working well because everything was setting rock hard and no cracking or flaking anywhere. Doing this work outside would be trickier, but here in the low temperature and high humidity setting it meant that the carbonisation process was happening slowly and under our control. And then onward, and after 6 days of this, the home straight was in sight, with Jen completing the entire back wall. First by filling in any large holes and then slapping that slurry coat on top. It's worth pointing out that another benefit of the lime is that it's softer than cement, so it gives and flexes with the wall over time. In a way it's a sacrificial part of the construction because you want the mortar to crumble before the stone fails if things get under pressure. That's why these repairs are needed and why holes appear in the wall in the first place. And if that sounds like a poor construction technique, go look at a new build house from today in 300 years time and see if that needs touching up. Day 7 and the bit we've been looking forward to, where we get to turn the walls white. This time we're mixing the lime with nothing but water to create a whitewash. The reason we're using metal tins for this is because the exothermic reaction creates a huge amount of heat. In fact, enough to melt the tarpaulin that was sat underneath these buckets. The process is pretty simple. You just keep adding water to the lime until it forms a sort of putty consistency, and then we added that to a large rubber tub once it had cooled down a bit, and then added more water to turn the whole lot into a milk-like liquid that we painted straight onto the walls. And for the next couple of days we painted. Following the same process as we used with a thicker mix, we would wet the walls down to stop the moisture being pulled out of the mix into the surface below too fast, and then applied the whitewash on top. The only problem was it seemed to go on fine but not be very white. In fact, it was almost translucent. Painting with milk is really the best way to describe it. So at the end of the first day's whitewashing, we weren't really sure it was working as planned. Okay, it's been a few days since we finished the first coat of whitewash, and all we've done since then is clear the rubbish off the floor and get everything out of here, or most of it anyway. We were a bit disappointed about how the walls weren't going white, and we knew that sometimes you have to do quite a few coats of whitewash. So we kind of accepted it. But I wasn't here the other day and I got cold, so I put the little heater that I found from our old house on in here just to warm it up. And I noticed that the wall behind it, within a few hours, went white. And it turned out that the reason the walls weren't white is because they weren't finished drying. So the plan today is to get the second coat of white done, and then the walls are finished. That will be the end of part one. The mix had thickened up a little bit over the last few days, so it did actually need a bit more water adding to it. So probably the way they'd have done it when they first built this place, I just went down to the stream and grabbed some water from there. And the second day of whitewashing got underway. The lime went onto the walls far easier this time round, the first coat giving it a smoother surface to paint onto, although painting white onto white meant it was far harder to see where we'd already been. But those minor issues aside, no real problems. And just in case any of the eagle-eyed amongst you spotted this marking on the wall here, let me explain it. There is a crack in the external wall where mortar has come away, and that has allowed some rain to come through this wall and cause damp here in the past. However, it's very minor, and the brown marks you can see are just stains from the salts that have come out of the stones. It's possible those will always come through the whitewash to some extent. But because we're in the process of fixing the crack on the outside, and because nothing we're doing on the inside is preventing the moisture that's in the wall from exiting, this is all going to be fine and dry, and it's already completely dry to the touch. Where it looks slightly grey is just where we've put down some fresh slurry mix to create a nice joint to the floor, and I'll put up some final footage filmed a few days after all this showing it completed. Right, second coat has been applied everywhere. I'm covered in the stuff, but the walls might be done.
And given we thought it was going to be the most tricky, complicated, time-consuming part of the whole process, that is amazing. They have been repointed, slurried, whitewashed, and in the exact type way they could have been done hundreds of years ago.
And it has come out exactly as we hoped it would. There's a couple of tiny spots where we're just filling in a few holes with a bit more slurry mix, but that will soon be gone. The back wall, where Jen was standing a moment ago, it looks amazing, and when the gym gear is in here, which is mostly black, it is going to pop against these white walls. I know some people said in the comments on previous videos, oh, it would have been lovely if you'd have kept them as they were, as exposed stone walls. It's just not practical. The lime mortar crumbles over time, enough that there would be a constant amount of dust floating around. It's much more sensible that they are white and smooth and much more wall-like.
So what's next? A little bit of tidying up to do around the pipework, the plug sockets, the roof line, and this trim. And we are going to have to use some modern type sealant to do so, and they're going to require this room to be a little bit warmer.
The problem right now in here is that the temperature is cold. It's about 6 or 7 degrees in here, and the relative humidity is high. And even if we don't extract any of the moisture from the air, the humidity relatively will come down. So that's all going to be good, and will happen as soon as we get on that wall up there installed a split heat pump air con unit.
After the heating, we just need to do the floor, a little bit of work on the old wood beams, and those two jobs are going to be so much easier than doing the walls, which means we are close to getting some gym gear in here. So like and subscribe, because after a few hundred years, this barn is about to get a whole new lease of life.